You know, when we think about building a community, we usually think about bringing people together. But what if, to save your community, you had to tear it apart? Today, we're diving into one of history's most difficult and gut-wrenching decisions, Ezra's Edict.
Seriously, think about that for a second. It's a heavy question, and I'm not talking about sacrificing money or land. What if the price was your family, your partner? What if it was your own children? Because that is the exact choice a community faced in 5th century BCE Jerusalem.
And this isn't some abstract thought experiment. This number you're looking at right now, 113, that's the number of families that were ordered to be broken apart. Husbands were commanded to send away their wives and the kids they had with them. I mean, that is a staggering human cost, and to even begin to understand it, we have to look at the crisis that made it seem necessary.
So, what exactly went down? Well, the decision is spelled out in what we're calling Ezra's Edict. And believe me, it was a radical solution to what they saw as a threat to their very existence. And there it is, right from the source, the core of the edict. The original Hebrew word here is lahotzi. It means to put out or to expel. So this wasn't a death sentence, but it was a permanent separation. Men were told to divorce their foreign wives and to send their own children away with them. To understand a decision this extreme, you have to understand the people who made it.
Okay, so first things first, we have to get rid of any idea that this was some strong, stable society. It was the complete opposite. This was a community absolutely defined by collective trauma, basically living on the edge of extinction.
Just look at this timeline. It really shows a community that's been through the ringer. It all starts around 586 BCE when they're exiled, their capital is completely destroyed. Decades later, they're finally allowed to come back home. These returning exiles were called the Gola, but they spent the next 70 years just trying to rebuild the absolute basics, like their temple. So when the scholar Ezra shows up around 458 BCE, he doesn't find a powerful nation. He finds what's called a remnant, just this fragile, tiny group absolutely terrified of making the same mistakes that led to their near destruction in the first place.
And this terror, it wasn't just some vague anxiety. It was a very specific threefold crisis. Think of it like a perfect storm of religious, political, and cultural pressures that all came together to make intermarriage feel like a fatal blow.
First up, the religious crisis. This community saw themselves as a holy seed. Now, this isn't about racial purity like we might think of it today. It was about being a people set apart, consecrated for a specific purpose by their God. They truly believed their ancestors were destroyed because they mixed their unique way of worship with the practices of all the nations around them. So for them, intermarriage wasn't just a personal choice. It was a communal sin that could bring back divine anger and, well, total annihilation.
Then you've got the political reality of the situation. This wasn't happening in a bubble. The Judeans were just this tiny little province inside the massive Persian Empire. And get this, Persian policy actually encouraged groups like them to stay distinct. It was a strategy for control. By keeping clear boundaries, the Judeans had a better shot at securing their land rights and their status as a self-governing people. So if you start blurring those lines with intermarriage, you're not just risking your culture, you're risking your political survival.
And finally, the cultural crisis. And this one might be the most immediate, the most tangible fear of all. A leader at the time, Nehemiah, he actually describes walking around and seeing children from these mixed marriages who couldn't even speak the Judean language anymore. Just pause and imagine that. Your culture is so fragile that within a single generation, your own language is vanishing from your own homes. That's not some abstract threat. That is literally the sound of a culture dying out. So you're facing this threefold crisis. What do? Well, the community took drastic action. But the consequence of what they did went so much further than the families involved. It actually ended up fundamentally redefining what it meant to be part of this community for thousands of years to come.
The investigation they launched found at least 113 men had married foreign women. But look at the breakdown here. This wasn't just everyday people. 17 priests and 10 Levites. We're talking about the religious leadership, the temple staff. They were on the list. And that just cranked up the sense of crisis. I mean, if your leaders can't even maintain the boundary, who can?
And I want you to picture this scene. This wasn't some snap judgment or an angry mob. The investigation was methodical. It took 3 full months, all through the cold, rainy winter season. You can almost feel the somber, deliberate weight of what they were doing, going through each family's case one by one.
But here is the single biggest consequence of this entire event, the one that changed everything. Before this moment, identity in this culture was largely patrilineal. It passed through the father. A Judean dad meant a Judean kid. Simple. But by ordering the children to be sent away with their non-Judean mothers, this act flipped the script entirely. It set a dramatic new precedent that, from this point forward, would make the mother's identity the defining factor for who is considered part of the Jewish people. That is a massive shift.
So what do we do with this today? I mean, let's be honest, this is a deeply unsettling story, and for 2,500 years, it has sparked debate. It forces us to wrestle with these huge questions about what it means to be pure, what it really takes to preserve a community, and where does compassion fit into all of it? One really interesting way to frame the tension is to see two different models of holiness right inside the biblical tradition itself. On the one hand, you have Ezra's model, which you could call a kind of defensive holiness. You're faced with a threat, so you maintain purity by cutting things off, separating, building walls to protect the group. But then later in the New Testament, you see Jesus modeling what you might call a transformative holiness. He shows purity not by avoiding what's considered unclean, but by engaging with it, and in his view, cleansing it, restoring the individual. Now, these aren't necessarily opposites, but they represent a pretty profound shift in approach. And that brings us right back to the core dilemma, doesn't it? To preserve a community, where is the line between necessary protection and harmful exclusion? Ezra and his generation, they drew their line in a place that seems incredibly brutal to us today. But their decision forces us to ask ourselves, in our own communities, in our own lives, where do we draw that line, and what are we willing to sacrifice to hold it?